So bear with us for a moment. There we go.
Okay, you are live. Sorry for the delay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Welcome to Planning Committee of Barrie City Council, and welcome to our virtual meeting. Of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, we are continuing to practice physical distancing. I'm in the council chambers, as is the city clerk. Our executive management team and all the councillors are participating via video conference. The first item on tonight's agenda is the consent agenda. We do have a public meeting tonight, which we'll do right after the consent agenda. That's for 521 Huronia Road, so we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, as always, I'll read out the title associated with the staff reports on tonight's agenda. And members of Planning Committee can ask that the item be held if you wish to discuss it tonight. If it is not held, the motion that's printed on the agenda is deemed to be approved on consent. There will be no further discussion of that item tonight. It will go forward to City Council at our meeting on next Monday for consideration. So the staff reports on tonight's agenda, the consent agenda. The first item is a zoning bylaw amendment application from Sean Mason Homes for 339 Veterans Drive, 341 Veterans Lane, and 19 Montserrat. Seeing no holds on that item, it is approved tonight. The next item is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 2 Arbor Trail. This is just for a single dwelling. No holds on that. It is approved. The next item is an application for zoning bylaw amendment from Mario Lampert Holdings, Inc. for 79 Gowan Street.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Ritma. Next item is a temporary use bylaw to permit agriculture uses at the southwest corner of Highway 400 and Harvey Road. The application is from Barrie Brine Developments Limited. No holds on that item. It is approved. We have an application for zoning bylaw amendment for 97 Miller Drive. No holds on that item. That one is approved as well. That's for 3 dwellings. The next item is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 989 Yonge Street. That's Yonge and Lockhart in the annexed lands. No holds on that tonight. It is approved. So those 5 matters that were approved will go forward to City Council on Monday night for final discussion and approval. The matter that was held, Gowan Street, 97 Gowan, we will deal with after the public meeting, and the 2 presentations which are on tonight's agenda. So with that, we'll now proceed with the public meeting under the Planning Act. We did encourage people to register prior to the meeting, but if you are watching tonight and you've not yet registered and you do wish to speak, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca. That's all one word, cityclerks@barrie.ca. Or you can call 797-5353 and our staff will send you the information required to call in or Zoom in tonight to the meeting. So the public meeting tonight, there's just one. It's to review an application for an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by MHBC Planning Inc. on behalf of Huronia Barrie Land Inc. for lands known municipally as 521 Huronia Road. Members of Planning Committee tonight will be listening to the presentations and any comments, of course, heard during the public meetings. But councillors cannot make comments or debate the item tonight. Tonight is just to hear from members of the public. If there are brief questions of clarification only, members of Planning Committee can ask those questions after the public comments, but there are not to be comments from councillors tonight. It's not that point in the process. That will happen at the time that the staff report comes to Planning Committee and then Council. at a later date. If you are watching or online tonight and you want further notification of the staff reports, when they will be coming to council, you can email the Legislative Services Branch. That's city clerks again at barrie.ca, cityclerks@barrie.ca. That'll make sure you're notified of the date that the report will come for debate at Planning Committee and Council. Ms. Banfield, our Director of Development Services, can you confirm that notification was conducted in accordance with the Planning Act for this public meeting?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, it was.
Thank you very much. I will now call on Eldon Theodore from MHBC Planning Inc. to provide the presentation on the application. This is for, again, the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment proposed for 521 Huronia Road. Mr. Theodore. Oh, Mr. Theodore is still on mute. There we go.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of committee. Eldon Theodore from MHBC. I apologize for the delay. There's always a lag on my computer whenever we switch through Zoom applications. I'm here tonight on behalf of Huronia Barrie Lands, Inc. And I'd also like to note that our transportation engineer, John Northcote, and our ecologist, Michael Mikowski, are also available tonight should there be any specific questions that need to be answered. I do have a presentation. Am I to share that presentation from my laptop?
Mr. Nolan, I think that's a yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Go ahead and share screen.
Fantastic.
Okay, we can see it.
Perfect. Excuse me. So the site today presently is vacant land. The overall size is approximately 15.3 acres, but the developable area itself is 3 acres. The remaining 12.3 acres, as shown to the south here, are intended to be conveyed to the city at the time of site plan and will remain as environmentally protected areas. Just surrounding the subject lands for context, to the north is low density residential, to the south is woodlots and wetlands, to the east are woodlots as well as Lovers Creek, and to the west is Huronia Road, the health services hub, commercial plaza, and vacant lands to the south. The lands are a combination of both environmental protection area and general industrial in the official plan. The general industrial permits a broad range of manufacturing, processing, and servicing. An official plan amendment is required to permit the proposed development. In doing so, this amendment would also protect the remainder of the property to the south by redesignating these portions from industrial to environmental protection. As many of you know, and just to update the public on this, the City of Barrie is currently undertaking a municipal comprehensive review of their official plan. The review will be recommending that the developable area be redesignated to residential. The owner's official plan amendment application that's being considered will advance those municipal comprehensive review recommendations. The residential on the property would allow for uses that would be more compatible with the existing residential to the north. And it is important to note that 3 consecutive city reports have recommended these lands to be converted to residential. The property is also zoned agricultural. This is a leftover zoning from a previous bylaw, and the zoning bylaw amendment being sought is required to permit any form of development on the property today. And I do note that similar to the official plan, the amendment is also being sought to protect the remainder of the property to the south by rezoning that from agricultural, which is shown in brown, to environmental protection in green. So the submitted proposal is 12 traditional townhomes and 92 stacked townhomes for a total of 104 homes. The community is intended to respect the limits of the adjacent wetland and the woodlot, as you see to the south here, showing the buffer within the plan. The plan also includes enhanced pedestrian experiences through the site via a walkway connecting east-west, and vehicular movement is intended to be maintained internally from a single access off of Huronia Road. Parking is within, attached garages within the townhomes, as well as visitor parking spaces at the surface, as well as underground parking spaces underneath the stacked dwellings. There's a total of 35 at-grade spaces and 127 underground parking spaces. A drop-off zone has been identified on the plan for ease of delivery. Buildings have been oriented to facilitate appropriate transition from the existing residential homes to the north, with a minimum 15-meter separation from the property line. And a 3-meter landscape buffer is proposed at a minimum along the northerly property line to help enhance privacy along that border. And this is just an example of the proposed townhomes that are being contemplated within the development, showing contemplated architectural styles that obviously will be refined through the site plan process when that application is made. And similarly, stacked townhomes following a similar architectural style and theme with combination of materials. So at our neighborhood meeting, as well as to the process, we received a number of comments with respect to what's been submitted to date. The main public comments we received relate to number one, the buffer that is proposed, that the width should be increased for more landscaping, fencing should be as tall as it can be, and solid to screen lights from the cars. And we should be protecting as many trees as possible. Also, number two, there were comments with respect to noise from the proposed ramp, ensuring that we mitigate many potential noises through acoustical measures. The third was protection from natural heritage, ensuring that the development does not impact natural habitat, wildlife, or species at risk. And the fourth being increased traffic, concerned about current volumes and what this development would add to it. Related to that, we received some recent city as well as landowner feedback within this area. With respect to A, the city's transportation department felt that the connection to Loon is likely needed for services, safety, and traffic control. And while our traffic study confirms that this development can be supported from Huronia Road alone, the city would like to provide options for vehicular movement. So it is recommended connecting through the existing gap on the south side of Loon Avenue as shown here. Second, the landowner to the east is also seeking access through the development as their lands are also developable. They are preparing applications and want to ensure that they can have a secondary access where Loon Avenue is the only access point for them today. So in receiving that feedback, we've identified a number of changes that we've made as part of our progress to date. So we're currently revising the proposal to address concerns that we've heard. It is a work in progress, and feedback from tonight's meeting is going to help us further inform our work as we move towards a resubmission. First, we've increased the landscape buffer by an additional 1.5 meters. This helps to provide additional space to protect existing trees. We can now put in a double row of trees, and it also offers a depth of planting and spacing that would help to protect for privacy and reduce overlook. We are protecting for the connection to the east through the design now, as well as connections to Loon Avenue. However, this will be controlled access through gates as shown at the bottom right of the presentation. This will help to prevent cutoff traffic to Loon Avenue, and residents would have fob access to be able to come in and out of those gates. As well, our ecologist has responded to resident concerns from the open house about the natural environment, and this has been uploaded on the city's website. Specifically, the environmental buffer defining the developable area and the protection areas were staked on site. An EIS has been submitted with this information, including a species of risk survey. This information is currently being reviewed by the city and Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. And to date, there have not been any significant issues raised with respect to that work. And I do remind this committee that the lands will continue to be conveyed to the city at the site plan stage for protection. And just further with respect to the landscape buffer, a little bit of detail about that. We're contemplating a 2.1 meter high board-on-board fence along the property line. We'll also be installing fast-growing coniferous plantings and high-branched trees that can ensure that there is enhanced privacy in combination with existing vegetation. The installation will also address grading and stormwater issues that have been raised at the neighborhood meeting along the shared property line as part of the site plan approval process. And an arborist report and a tree protection plan will be required as part of the site plan process, speaking directly to those matters. And just in terms of traffic concerns from this development, we note that Loon Avenue has a design capacity as a road for 400 vehicles per hour. And that's based on just the simple design of the road itself. And we noted that at peak times, it averages 211 vehicles per hour, or 53% of that capacity. And that's based on a 2030 projection. That leaves about 42% of capacity available for on this road. Overall, approval of this development will not have a significant impact on the existing or future traffic patterns, as it is only adding 20 additional cars per hour during the peak period. An updated transportation report will be submitted and considered by the city's engineering department. And as you can see at the bottom here, we are contemplating traffic control measures that will ensure the community will not become a cut through to Loon Avenue. But finally, we'll continue to work through the comments and feedbacks, particularly the ones that we hear today, with the objective of responding to all comments prior to the final recommendation report that's brought back to this committee. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Theodore. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'll ask Michelle Banfield, our Director of Development Services, to give us an update on the status of this application.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. In addition to the presentation by Mr. Theodore, a memorandum was provided to Planning Committee to describe the application. The applications for amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment are currently in circulation with city staff and our partner agency. A neighborhood meeting was held on July 8th in a virtual setting where approximately 23 residents, as well as the applicant, consulting team, Ward 9 Councillor Sergio Morales, and planning staff attended. In addition, the city has received numerous pieces of correspondence relating to this proposal. Key items being raised include the proposed location of the access road adjacent to the rear yards of the residences to the north, preservation of the Lovers Creek wetland and wildlife habitat, the potential impacts, streetlights, noise, and headlights created by the traffic within the proposed development, safety concerns raised respecting the right-in, right-out access constraints onto Huronia Road, and a potential drop in property values due to the development of the site. The applications are currently undergoing a detailed technical review, and the primary planning and land use matters being considered include effective traffic circulation, municipal services, and pedestrian connections for this site, which has resulted in the requirement to access the road allowance to Loon Avenue on the adjacent lands, a coordinated development concept with the lands that have development potential to the east of this property, confirmation of the developable area, including acceptable buffering and preservation of the Lovers Creek wetland, and justification of the requested changes to the official plan and the appropriateness of the site-specific amendments to the zoning bylaw to accommodate the proposed development. Planning staff are anticipating bringing a staff report to Planning Committee with a recommendation on this application in early 2021. All comments received from the public and during the technical review process, including all the calls, emails, and what we hear tonight, will be included and addressed in the planning staff report. The submission materials and key dates associated with these applications are available for viewing online on the city's proposed development webpage under Ward 9, or by contacting the senior planner, Celeste Kitsemtry, directly. This concludes my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Banfield. Okay, again, if you're watching tonight and you haven't registered and you do wish to speak at this public meeting, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 797-5353 and staff will send you the information that you need to participate tonight. If you are registered to speak for this public meeting, you can use the raise your hand function or press #9 to raise your hand and unmute yourself, or press #6 to unmute yourself. So what I will do in terms of the deputations tonight, I'll just ask that once the member of the public has joined the meeting, our staff will let you into the meeting. Please begin by stating your first and last name and your address. We do need that for the record of the meeting under the Planning Act. And then proceed with your comments. Questions, if you have questions that you want to raise tonight, please do. They will be noted by staff, but they won't be responded to tonight. They're not going to try and respond to everyone's questions tonight. They will be addressed in the final recommendation report, or at least the staff report that will be presented to council at a later date for decision. So I have 10 individuals who have registered to speak at tonight's meeting. I will go through them in the order that we've got them. The first is Monica Sargent. Ms. Sargent, welcome to Planning Committee.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hello. My name is Monica Sargent and I live at 83 Loon Avenue in Barrie. And thank you for that presentation. I do have some major concerns regarding this possible development. I have written them down, so I hope you're patient with me as I go through these concerns. Loon Avenue is a very vibrant, caring, closely connected neighborhood community which cares about our immediate surrounding area. The street, as you know, is bordered by green space, which includes the wetlands along Huronia Road and the environmentally protected area along Lovers Creek, which is behind our home. When this subdivision was established in the late 1990s, Councillor Chalmers fought very hard to preserve the green space and this environmentally sensitive area. He foresaw the benefits of green space for people's mental health as well as physical health. And I ask you to keep that in mind, in particular during these COVID times. As a registered nurse, retired now, I am very well aware of how much green space influences our mental health. Each spring, our neighbors participate in the Barrie Spring Into Clean projects, and we clean up litters in our parks and woodlands. During these times, we see many and abundant wildlife, including herds of deer, as well as turkeys, and I could go on, including many chorus frogs. And also the numbers of those chorus frogs were a lot decreased this year. We feel because of the storms, as well as the development that has taken place along Mapleview with the redirection of Lovers Creek. The wood thrush is another species that is endangered as well as threatened, along with snapping turtles, eastern peewees. I could go on. These are already noted in the environmental impact report, but it is just too easy to dismiss them. The buffer zone that is proposed is really negligible as these animals do not understand a buffer zone. The fencing would not protect them or the families that it impacts in these homes. One of the major concerns I have is there has been little consideration taken in the published studies for access for emergency vehicles. Currently, the single road along Huronia for access in and out is very, very difficult. We live close to here and we see how difficult it is to even turn left at the stoplight, let alone turn right. There is very limited space for all of the residents in these proposed townhouses, either above or below ground. Should there be a fire at any one of these complexes, as we have seen throughout Canada, it is doubtful that larger fire trucks or any emergency vehicle will be able to drive through as needed. And also for underground parking, I ask you to really consider the fact that this is a wetland. We have a retention pond behind us, and anytime it rains, that pond fills up and our sump pump goes immediately. If there is a storm, the sump pump does not run. So I am downstairs bailing the water, especially if the electricity goes out, and there are numerous outages in this area. These are just realistic concerns that we have living in this wetland protected area. It is a marshland, and as such, even today going along Huronia Road, there continues to be a deep ditch that is still filled with water. And that water will be there. It does not run off. It is like a sponge. If you, as proposed, feel that it will all be fine if you go in and dig it up and then just pave it over, where is that water going to go? Where is it going to be absorbed? These homes that will back onto that will have major flooding issues in their basements because it is a very, very sensitive wetland. And I urge you to reconsider anything on that land. I do have numerous questions for the committee, and one of them is very basic. Why is it essential that this small plot of land of 3 acres need to be rezoned from industrial to multi-dwelling? If it was not good enough for industrial, why is it suitable for multiple dwellings? It is an eco-sensitive land. It is something that is at risk in this country and this city. We should be preserving it and using this as green space, as has been done in other communities, instead of plowing everything over with pavement. Is this not a shocking disregard of our planning system, as quoted by our deputy mayor in the Barrie Advance on the 3rd of September with other developments? I certainly feel it is. The property is not feasible for any buildings, let alone 127 of them, or 104. The underground parking, as I have stated, again, will create massive drainage problems. That is all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Sargent, for those comments. Appreciate that. And I should note to everybody who's on the line tonight, if you have additional comments or want to send us a copy of your remarks, please do. That helps our staff, of course, ensure that all questions are at least addressed in the staff report that will come forward. Thank you, Ms. Sargent, for those remarks. Next on the list, I have Christine McDougall. Ms. McDougall, welcome to Planning Committee.
Sorry, I think I made a mistake. I have nothing to say tonight.
Oh, okay. Thank
Sorry
you for
about that.
registering anyway. Not a problem. Thanks for being here. Our next registered deputant is Michelle Lackey. Michelle, welcome to Planning Committee. Or Lakey, I'm sorry if I got that wrong.
Good evening, everyone. It is actually Michelle Lackey.
Okay. Hi.
I'm a resident at 163 Loon,
Okay.
and I have a number of concerns about this potential rezoning and development. I am reading off my sheet of paper, so if I stumble, I apologize in advance.
No worries.
Okay, to begin, I'm not in favor of this rezoning this area to residential. And I don't think it's the right decision for the city or the environment. This land has been vacant for decades and vacant for good reason. It's a part of Lovers Creek wetland and is a significant woodland that is home to numerous species and species at risk. And we're so fortunate to observe them right from our back door. But most importantly here is that this land is on a level 1 natural heritage resource. And I understand it has pre-existing development designations on a portion of this property, but I'm of the opinion that these underlying designations should be removed, and then this should all be designated EP and conservation to protect this feature and to add value to the existing community. There's very little EP land left in Southeast Barrie. We need to preserve it, not chip away at it. There's many environmental concerns surrounding this development, but there's one particular aspect I'd like to talk about tonight: the 5-meter buffer around the wetland boundary. It's my understanding that it is Ontario regulation to have a 30-meter buffer around a wetland. So I'm not sure how they've gotten away with a 5-meter buffer. I understand that variances can occur in urban situations, but I don't think that a 5-meter buffer will provide any protection to this area, especially if you consider that many of these townhomes are crammed right up against the protective fencing. And I ask you, do you really think that the wetland is going to be safe from the damaging effects of humans with only a 5-meter buffer? It does not seem nearly enough for this sensitive area. I think the buffers need to be reconsidered given the specific nature and intentions of this development. As for the land use, I think it would be ideal to have this land used for something more environmental, such as conservation, a conservation area or outdoor education center for schools, or a trail system like in the Arda Bluffs, something that would complement the natural heritage feature and enhance the community through recreation and education. There are tons of residential buildings happening in the south end of Barrie, in the Salem and Hewitt secondary plans. I don't understand why we would remove what little EP land and natural heritage features we have just to put in more housing. However, in the unfortunate event that if this development moves forward, I do have some comments and issues on the buildings specifically. The height of the buildings and setbacks, I feel that the 14-meter high 4 stories are way too high for this area, and the 15-meter setback is not sufficient. It's going to tower over our homes. The road also seems too close for comfort. 4.5 meters is not a lot. And I think the landscape buffer should be increased and leave as many natural mature trees there. I also feel that the density is too great for this area. The proposed community will indefinitely cause traffic issues in the community, as well as excess noise, litter, and light pollution for the wetland. It will literally drive the species out of their habitats, as well as us on Loon Avenue. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Lucky, thank you very much for those comments and for being here tonight. I will now call on Roger Pennell. Mr. Pennell, you are our next speaker. Welcome to Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. My name is Roger Pennell. I live at 153 Loon Avenue. And I agree with everything that has been said by my neighbors so far tonight. And I'm encouraged to see so many of them out here. I would point out to council members that we do have a petition going in order to fight the development at the site of 521 Huronia Avenue. And as of about an hour ago, we were up to 740 signatories to that petition. This is something obviously that has mobilized our neighborhood to an extreme extent. One thing I'd like to mention is that the reason that we have EP designations for land and environmental protections for lands are to protect ourselves from short-sightedness and for short-term profiteering, and make sure that we're not doing anything that negatively impacts our community and our environment in the long term in order to allow development to maximize profitability on a plot of land. And to this extent, I see absolutely no reason why we would allow this development to rezone the portions of this land that are currently Zone 1 protected to developable land. The only reasons that you would do something like that are if it were a last resort type of situation where there was no more developable land and there was immense pressure on the city to create more residential units, or if this development offered some sort of extraordinary advantage to the community as a whole. And from what we're seeing in the plans here, there is no extraordinary advantage to this particular development. In fact, it's the same as every other stick frame townhouse development going up around town. So the real question becomes, why would we allow all of this redesignation for this tiny plot of land to create a scenario where we have such tightly packed residential units in our community? I know that the traffic study apparently thinks that 410 cars per hour is not a problem on Loon Avenue, but I would remind council that there are 2 elementary schools that are directly adjacent to Loon Avenue. And both of those schools have a tremendous number of small children that are walking to school and back from school every day, typically during those peak hours. I would also like to point out that the right turn only ingress into the development, as well as right turn only out of the development, means that the only way you can access this development from the outside is to come from Mapleview to get in, but to get out, you can only head down towards Big Bay Point Road. Now, the majority of people that are going to be moving into this development are going to be most likely commuters. So their main point of access that they're looking for when they're leaving the development is going to be the 400 highway. And that means that all of this traffic is going to be going down Huronia, across Big Bay Point, down through Fairview, past all of our new emergency services buildings, and trying to access the 400 highway from Essa Road. Or they're going to be using this new turnoff that they're proposing at the vacant space down Loon Avenue, and then coming through our community to get back out and be able to make a left-hand turn at the lights at Huronia and Loon, so that they can get out to the main access points there. If they're not commuters, they're still going to be looking to access things like Walmart, grocery stores, Park Place. So I believe that the traffic study fundamentally misunderstands the real nature of our neighborhood and how that traffic is going to flow, and what kind of impact it's going to have on our community as a whole. With that, I think that's the end of my comments for this evening.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Pennell, and thank you for sort of reiterating that you agreed with your neighbors, but then raising new issues. We do appreciate you doing that in your comments. Thanks for being here tonight. Our next deputant is Bob Cole, and I have to ask, that Bob Cole? We'll be able to tell right away as soon as you say something. Nope, Mr. Cole's still on mute. Sorry, Mr. Cole, we can't hear you. I'm not sure if it's mute on your end or on our end.
Okay, now I figure the button.
Oh, there we go. Welcome to Planning Committee, sir, and the floor is yours.
And no, I'm not the hockey guy.
Still want to hear from you.
Yeah. No, I totally disagree with this whole take over the environment and redesign level ones to allow for townhouses. But you guys are gonna win, so we know that. So if you're gonna stick this development in here, it's gotta be okay for us to try to live around this abortion you're gonna stick in here. You've given us a whole extra few meters or whatever on your 3 meters before for your new trees and everything, but I don't think it's gonna do a lot of good in the end. I just totally disagree with the whole development in the first place, but I know you guys are gonna put it through to hit your taxes. And the worst part is now that you're gonna extend this extra road down to Loon, that developer now is gonna go and gonna apply for more townhouses, so that part of the environment of trees and everything that we walk through myself 3 times a week through there will also be taken out later down the road by other townhouses in the next development coming along, or houses through that new easement road. Totally disagree. But as I said, you're gonna win anyway, so please put up a high fence so you don't have your headlights coming in my back bedroom at 4 in the morning when these guys go down to Toronto to go to work. I'd also appreciate it if it is gonna go through, which I know it's gonna go through, because it is a condominium setup. So please put in your bylaws that none of these people in these 8 townhouses on my backyard can back into their driveway and put their bloody headlights in my bloody bedroom at 4 o'clock in the morning or any other time of the day. That's a bylaw you can put in a condominium, just like you do everything else where they can't paint their doors, they can't change their lights, they can't do anything else. So that would be a great appreciation. Other than that, I don't have a lot, other than if you guys are gonna put all kinds of buffer trees down here, don't use emerald cedars because the deers love them and they come by here every single day. And they've eaten all mine in my own backyard because I don't have a fence. So that's just a bit of economical advice to you not to waste your money on emerald cedars, okay? Anyway, I got nothing else to say other than don't do this to the environment, please. Thank you, bye.
Mr. Cole, thank you for your comment. Sorry, we just need your address, sir.
177 Loon, the second house from, I'm looking
Okay.
right at it. I'm looking right at it.
Point of procedure, Mayor Lehman. I think it's point of procedure, if I can, or point of order, point of procedure, if I can.
There's no such thing as point of procedure, but what's your point of order, Councilor Ross?
Point of order. I thank Mr. Cole for his comments. I respect this process too much to, if he has concerns that this is going to go through, they're going to win. Could I, in this moment, very quickly just defer to staff to clarify for all the residents? The previous gentleman, I could hear his voice shaking. This is very personal for a lot of people. If Ms. Banfield could very quickly describe how this is a application, how it works, and how there's nothing, going to win or set in stone. Again, the very first development application that came to Ward 9 was rejected since I've come into office. So I want residents to believe in the process. And I think this is a very important point to get that clarification.
Yeah, that's fair. Ms. Banfield, I was actually thinking of saying something similar, and I understand the cynicism, Mr. Cole, but the reality is actually residential development is not fiscally positive for the city in most cases to begin with, at least ground related isn't. And at this point in the process, so, if we were looking to increase taxes, this isn't the kind of development that we would be favoring, but it's not about that anyway. It is required to be under legislation, a decision as to whether it's good planning or bad planning. We certainly hear your belief that it isn't. Ms. Banfield, could you just highlight what happens after a public meeting in the application process?
Absolutely, Mayor Lehman. The public meeting, the statutory public meeting is actually done very early in the planning process. We get an application, we deem it complete, and the first thing we do is circulate it to different departments and get a public meeting scheduled. So as I said in my presentation, everything that we hear tonight has to be responded to before it comes back to council. Sometimes responding to what we hear results in updated plans, updated projects, updated reports, and all of that does take time. And as I said, we are not looking at a staff to bring this back probably until 2021. So as I said, the public meeting is very early in the process.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms. Banfield. Our next speaker tonight is Roy Coretta. Mr. Coretta, welcome to Planning Committee. And Roy, if you can hear me, you're still on mute. I don't know if that's on your end, but if you can, there we go.
Hello, Mayor Lehman.
Yes, we can hear you now.
It's Roy Coretta. Is that the person you wanted?
That is the person I wanted. And we're just wondering about, we need your address for the record, and then we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Sure. I live at 43 Gadwall Avenue.
All right, sir, go ahead.
So just to give you an idea, that street almost runs parallel with Loon, but I'm further to the north of the development.
Okay.
So when I look out my second story deck, I actually see the trees in question that are part of the north end of that development. So that gives you a better perspective. I have sent in some written comments with some photos, with some details. And tonight, I thank you for the opportunity just to go over some general summaries that I've observed. So first and foremost, thank you for your time this evening to all of you, especially Sergio there in Ward 9. We've done some work previously on Gadwall Avenue, and it's worked out very well. So thanks, Sergio, for all your help. To all of you, my name is Roy Coretta, and I've resided in Barrie for over 20 years in the same location, located in the subdivision immediately north of the proposed site development. With over 20 years of experience in the land development engineering field, working alongside colleagues of engineers of various disciplines, developers, planners, and city staff, I would like to outline my observations of this proposed development. In my humble opinion, I offer the following. The underlying theme that I have observed throughout the proposed development is the lack of balanced design elements, coupled with the lack of harmony shown towards the existing Loon Avenue homeowners. These elements are very taxing to my sensibilities as a long-standing Barrie resident and as an industry professional. More often than not, we forget that we live in a great city that offers natural elements not easily found anywhere else. We fail to realize that as stewards of this great city, we have an obligation to keep Barrie's uniqueness and not let it become a mini Toronto, which is what is happening now. The errors in the planning of the Highway 400 commercial zone area at the south end of the city is a constant reminder of what happens when design elements are implemented to minimum standards and high density is employed. Although the proposed development is much smaller to scale in comparison, it echoes the same deficiencies and errors that we now have to live with. This type of harmful planning needs to stop right now in order to fill the obligations of employing best management practices that is incumbent of all professionals in all disciplines to help bring a harmony and balance to the development of our beautiful city. As the site proposal stands today, there is no harmony with existing surroundings, and there is no balance of elements within the site plan itself. The three major issues I have pertain to the following and are further detailed in my written submission to this public meeting. And the issues are, number one, the lack of a harmonious buffer zone between the existing residences along Loon Avenue and the north boundary line of the proposed development that will see all of these existing trees that now act as a natural buffer being effectively removed. Item number two, the proposed high residential density that goes from light industrial to 53 residential units per hectare to 80 residential units per hectare. In other words, 69 units to 104 residential units. That's a 50% increase. That's too much of a quantum leap as far as I'm concerned. And thirdly, the proposed right-in and right-out site entrance is very restrictive in turning movements and forces major trip routes to go contrary to existing efficient traffic routes that lead to major destination points at the city's south end. Now, there may be some merits to reducing the residential density that could lead to a greater buffer zone for the existing residents along Loon Avenue. and there may be some merits at using the assumed right-of-way located immediately east of house number 147 on Loon Avenue as the site entrance, affording fuller and safer turning movements at the Loon and Huronia intersection. But failing to see the suggested merits of looking at other layout options by reducing density, creating a greater buffer zone for the Loon Avenue residents, and changing the site entrance to come off of Loon Avenue, this site may only be good for light industrial as it was intended to be. And failing this, perhaps there is no recourse here but to leave the land alone as is, or convert it to a parkland or conservation area, which would lend to the existing elements that are there right now. In concluding, ladies and gentlemen, I find that it's not the responsibility of Barrie residents to ensure this development is economically viable for the developer, even under the guise of providing affordable housing. The developer made or lost profit on the day this land was purchased, knowing full well what the official plan allowed and the boundary of the protected environmental elements. This is a part of risk-taking that happens every day in the development industry. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. The minimum design layout elements and the overall disregard for maintaining the balanced site plan that is harmonious with its surroundings is very upsetting to me as a long-standing Barrie resident and also as a professional. As the site proposal stands today, I do not support this development. I thank you all for your time, and I appreciate your consideration in my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Coretta, for bringing your experience to those comments. We appreciate you being here tonight and giving us your opinion. Next, I will call on Megan Pagonis. Megan, welcome to Planning Committee.
Hi, it's actually Megan
Megan,
Pagonis.
sorry.
That's okay. I'm a resident of 171 Loon Avenue.
All right, thank you.
I'm probably going to echo some of the same sentiments as my neighbors have. But I just wanted to start, I'm sorry I might get emotional too, but I love my house. I bought my house because it backed onto this gorgeous forest. My grandparents lived with me until my grandfather passed away and my grandmother got too sick, and they have enjoyed the nature and the beauty, and they have been residents of Barrie for over 40 years. This is a highlight of our city, and my friends from Toronto come and they love Barrie now because they see how you can live in cottage country but still be in the city. I have friends from Toronto who want to move to Barrie because they've been in my house, because they've seen how wonderful this neighborhood is. And to have that being squashed and taken away for a few more residences when we've got so many other places we can develop residences that won't attack this natural beauty doesn't make any sense to me. Not only that, I'm just going to refer to actually a slide Eldon showed during this presentation in the zoning bylaw slide that he had for 2009-141. I believe some of the picture even shows that some of the land development is going to have to recruit some of the environmentally protected area in order to put these buildings up. So I'm a bit confused by that picture, and that just adds to even more of my concern about what's going to go on with the environment. The first speaker that alluded to all of the flooding, that is a huge concern for me. I haven't read anywhere in any of these reports, and maybe I just missed it, but we have seasonal water that comes up to my back gate every single year. What is going to happen with the flooding? What's going to happen with all of my neighbors? I live on a significant grade at 171. It slopes south and east, so it helps keep my house dry. Well, if we let that all go, where's all that water going to go? Am I going to start having to worry about flooding and protecting my house? The other thing is, after all of the construction around Harvey Road and some other places, I noticed a significant increase in wildlife in our backyard compared to normal. I'm pretty sure a lot of those deer and turkeys and other animals started coming over this way because they had more space. They had somewhere to go after some of those other trees were taken out in the wooded areas that were all leading up Fairview and helping with the Harvey Road extension. If we now start cutting further and chipping away at this more and more, where are they going to go? What's going to happen to all of that nature and that natural beauty? It just boggles my mind. The other part is safety. I have young children. My children are the children that are walking to those schools that are adjacent. The traffic is busy already. People cut through Loon Avenue very frequently. The traffic report doesn't seem to account for that. It seems to be a lot of it to do with what was going on Huronia Road. And I'm not sure why they're saying that there isn't a lot of backup, because most days when I look up Huronia Road all the way to Big Bay Point, it comes almost to Loon Avenue and how bad the traffic gets at times. So especially with the accommodating for the right in, right out, and then joining it up to Loon, there's still going to be that issue if they do need to go towards Big Bay Point. And then what about all of the residences when they're trying to turn left out? You know, an increase of 20 cars an hour. Well, if you go up Loon, that's going to go past my house, past Gadwall Avenue. If it gets backed up that bad, how are we going to get in and out in the morning? I don't know if this traffic was ever designed or thought of for that many residences that cut in. And then if they go into a phase 2 and then there's more access from Loon, how's that going to be accommodated? So those are some of my concerns with traffic, the safety for my kids biking and walking to school. It never crossed my mind that there would be that much traffic on my street. Obviously, I'm concerned about the value of my home. If I feel like this is no longer a place I want to live because everything's getting ruined around it, I'm not sure that I'm going to get the same value for my home when I sell it, to be quite honest. You know, who's going to want to be on Loon Avenue anymore? It's going to be one of those more major routes that's harder to sell. The other concern that I had was I find a lot of things were presented to us maybe somewhat last minute, or there was like when the environmental impact studies were done, I thought that there was a process where we were supposed to be informed about it, and we weren't when they were actually conducting the like wildlife studies and all of those studies. I didn't even know that they were going to be drilling in my backyard to test the water until the day it happened, and there was a huge machine in my backyard. So there's been a lack of communication there, which makes me concerned. If there's a lack of communication there, or there's a lack of clarity, how can I be convinced that all of the environmentally protective things that are supposed to be happening if this development goes through are actually going to happen? How can I be confident in that? I'm very concerned about that. The other thing that, oh, sorry, I just had a couple extra notes that I added on as I was looking here. Sorry, I think that was it. Those were the main ones, was the traffic, the safety, the value of the home, and then not being confident in this process, because I feel like a lot of things were kind of skimmed over and given to us late last minute. And I'm not confident that, you know, if this does go forward, that we're going to get the answers that we need in a timely fashion and get everything that we do need. I really hope that all of you really consider about whether this really is the best place for us to add more housing. It's beautiful here. If you've never been, please drive by. We'll give you a cup of coffee on your way. You can enjoy the trails. We'd love to see you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments and for being here tonight. We appreciate you giving us that perspective. And our next speaker is Chris Pagonis. You're up next, sir.
Hello, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Chris Pagonis. I'm at 171 Loon Avenue. You just heard my wife a second ago, who, you know, wonderful speaker. So I wanted to tell you a story. In 2014, at 6 p.m., my wife and I had been here a short time. We just moved to Barrie from Toronto. A drunk driver lost control of her car while traveling east on Loon Avenue. She ended up crashing onto the front lawn of 173 Loon Avenue, my next door neighbor. She took out the tree and continued through the tree into the middle of the lawn. But it didn't stop there. She put her car into reverse and she did a complete 180 with her car. She then hit the lamppost, the green box that are those electrical boxes that are bolted to the ground, and she took them both. She went through them and ended up in the middle of the lawn at 169 Loon Ave, my neighbor on the other side. The reason why I bring this up is because Loon is a very, very busy street. And the buffer that we have in front of that street is 4.5 meters currently. 4.5 meters, which is exactly what the buffer out the back is now proposed to another street. Another street that right now might not be too busy, but with future developments, as we've heard today, that are potential, this could get even busier and busier. We do not feel that safe letting our kids play out on the front lawn as is. We play in the backyard. The last thing we want is another street that close to the backyard, and it is a safety concern. Both my wife and I work in brain injury. We work with rehab and helping people every single day try to get back, and the number one cause is car accident. It is various methods of being hit by a car that causes this, and we see the effects every single day. It is terrible. So to have someone come in and say that we want a second street that close, 4.5 meters or 14 and a half feet, the average length of a car is 15 feet. It's not even a car length that that's proposed to go in between there. I understand that they're going to put up fences and everything like that, but as I've said, things don't stop cars. They are considered deadly instruments when put in the wrong hands, and people will go through them. Our backyards are not big here, and I think the reason for that is because of this lovely agricultural background that we have. So what we are provided with is a smaller backyard, but we get this view that is wonderful. But if we take that away, you will have two streets with just a 4.5 buffer on either end, which is not precedent. There's not a lot of places in Barrie that do anything like that. And I think that it's very important that we do not start this precedent here and allow this everywhere, because this isn't Toronto. We moved from Toronto to get to Barrie, this beautiful place. And we don't want to start this precedent of being able to put a house between two major streets. That's the main concern that I have and that I wanted to bring up, that we've already had issues with this. Loon is and has always been a dangerous street. We have speed bumps further down, but not where we are, not these first 20 houses. We see a lot of racing and dangerous driving right through there, and to bring that into our backyards is unfair. And we ask you not to do that for that very specific reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pagonis, for your comments and for being here tonight to give them to us. Our next speaker is Howard Burnick. Mr. Burnick, welcome to Planning Committee. There he is, Mr. Burnick. Welcome to Planning Committee, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'd like to defer initially to Darren Vella, who's working on our planning with us and is more knowledgeable in these matters. And I may jump in thereafter. Darren, are you on the line? And could you open him up, Mr. Mayor?
Sure, we can hear from Mr. Vella first. Is Mr. Vella online? Yes. Okay. Mr. Vella, welcome to Planning Committee.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Hope everyone is doing well. As Mr. Burnick has indicated, I am working on behalf of his company, 1818 Development, Inc. And Mr. Burnick is the abutting owner to the subject property to the east. So Mr. Burnick owns the lands in which the Loon Avenue connection could be established. So we did on his behalf provide a very simple piece of correspondence today on this matter. So I'm going to be brief. So similar to the application that's before you, the planning department has also agreed that our property, being Mr. Burnick's property, would be better used for residential versus employment uses. At this stage, we are currently undertaking a 3-season environmental study in order to determine the development limits of our property. It is our expectation that sufficient land will be available to allow for a development that will connect the proposed road under the application before you this evening through our property and into Loon Drive. And from what I'm hearing from the public, that may address one of their concerns. Noted that there's many being presented this evening. I can also just summarize, Your Worship, that Mr. Theodore has provided an accurate presentation of our discussions to date, and we look forward to continued dialogue with the applicant and the city on trying to arrive at a responsible development for the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vella. Mr. Bernick, did you want to add anything?
I just add that my late father has been a developer, was a developer in Barrie since the 1950s and developed very responsibly in Barrie and has given back a great deal to the community with regard to schools and parks and entrepreneurship center at Georgian College, as well as land that was given for a house of worship on Huronia Road near Lockhart. So we understand the concerns of existing residents and have been aware of those and tried to be sensitive to those since the 1950s in Barrie. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. And I'm sorry, Mr. Vella and Mr. Bernick, we do need your address for the record, as all presenters have to give that to us for the record of the meeting.
Howard Bernick, I'm at 40 Burton Road in Toronto.
Okay, and Mr. Vella?
647 Welham Road in Barrie.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you both for your comments. Next to speak tonight, I have Angela Wiggins. Ms. Wiggins, welcome to Planning Committee. And as soon as you're unmuted, there we go. The floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to say I would echo a lot of what my neighbors have said tonight. And I'm at 50 Gadwell Avenue. So not directly adjacent to the proposed development, but driving on Loon regularly. And I have 3 concerns. 2 are related to parking and traffic in general. Right now, most of, I would say, the people who live in this area are trying to access Mapleview on a regular basis, and it requires going out to the light at Loon and turning left onto Huronia. And that light is not particularly long and doesn't give you a particularly long period of time. I know when I'm headed to work in the morning, I sometimes do need to wait for a few different lights in order for that to work. And so I do have concerns about the impact on traffic onto Loon if that connecting street is established and how that will create buildup. And also with respect to the traffic on Huronia. If you're coming south on Huronia and trying to turn left into the Loon subdivision, it's a difficult turn to make at times. People do drive past on the right very aggressively. There's lots of challenges there. So if there's an increased traffic flow coming from this new road, I do worry about how that will clog that intersection further and what potential might be there. The second concern I have is related to parking. As a few of my neighbors have mentioned, many of these people may be commuting down to Toronto, and they may be 2-car households or potentially 3 cars. And there's certainly parking challenges already in the neighborhood, lots of street parking throughout the spring, summer, and fall months. And the parking lot at Lennox is regularly full with cars, even when there is no sporting event going on. So I do wonder what the parking plan is for this area. I understand there's planned underground parking, but I would expect that that would not be more than 1 car per household. And so just what the impacts on that would be in the area. And then my third concern is related to if this development does go through. Walkability is really important for a neighborhood. And right now, Huronia Road, it's not very walkable. It's not very connected. There's no sidewalk. Even to just walk over to the Huronia Urgent Care Clinic, you can't connect on a sidewalk very well, and particularly from this new proposed development. So I would be curious what would be done to connect this new development into the rest of the subdivision, just to make sure that it is one broad community. Those are all my comments, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Wiggins, for those comments, and to all who have come tonight to give us comments on this. I will make a last call for any additional speakers. Please email cityclerks@barrie.ca or call 797-5353. Staff can send you the information required to participate tonight. Do we have anyone else at the moment, Madam Clerk? Okay. At this point then, I will remind everyone on the call that any further written comments you may have, please do send them to us after the meeting. They can be sent directly to Celeste Kitsemetry, the file planner, and her email address is celeste.kitsemetry@barrie.ca. All of the information around the application is on the city's website, including those contact details. I will now ask if members of Planning Committee have questions, brief questions of clarification, and just to reiterate so everybody is aware of the procedure. Councillors are not allowed to make comments on the application as part of a public meeting under the Planning Act. I'm sure the ward councillor and others may have plenty to say on this, but the time for that will be when the application is in front of council with a staff report. This is just the consultation meeting, and tonight is for the public. That being said, if there are any quick questions of clarification from members of Planning Committee, I will start with the ward councillor, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. To Ms. Banfield, this question has been brought up many times today, and has been asked dozens of times through emails to myself and to staff. So I just want to very quickly and efficiently answer the question about EP. A lot of people have concern that if this was EP, how dare we essentially go down that route of converting EP. But I did listen to the presentation by the applicant's planner about the bottom portion of the parcel being EP and being remaining EP and actually being handed to the city, and then the developable land being on the north side and that not being EP. So the very important question, Ms. Banfield, is this EP land? And if so, is the EP land on the south side that's not going to be developed as part of the application? And can we just clarify that? Because I think that's a very personal and emotional argument for a lot of people right now.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, this property has two zones. Part of it is EP, environmental protection, and that is the more southerly portion of the property. And then there is some developable land, which right now is for employment uses, but the application is to look to change that to residential uses. And as the applicant said, the environmental protection land, should this application be approved in the future, that land would be dedicated to the city at that time.
So there's no scenario where EP land right now is even being considered to be built on. Is that correct? Or the applicant has proposed. Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, the boundaries of EP land are defined often by what is on the ground through the environmental impact statements and working with our partners at the Conservation Authority. And so that's how that boundary gets defined. And then typically by default, what is not EP is what's considered developable.
Okay. Some really good points earlier, and I know we can't get answers on everything right now, but the buffer zone, and I know there was we had residents with job-related experience about the potential concern there. I appreciate the applicant from increasing their initial from the 3 meters to the 4.5. So I really do appreciate that. That said, you have my question is to the applicant. You have so much land on the southerly portion of this parcel. And again, I appreciate 4.5. I'm not trying to get greedy or not, not being appreciative of that. But do you have the potential to increase it even more? Do you have the potential to create such a buffer that we can potentially save a lot of the trees that are already there and actually create a very strong distinction, not only for the protection of potential vehicles and coming to yards and things of that nature, but just to create a very more harmonious development. And normally in developments, you can't get past 3 meters, or 4 meters is at most because of the constrictions of a site. But all this land that you have on the south, I think, and I know that there's some playground and amenity area that you're providing on the south side. I think there might be an argument to be made to shifting that towards the north. Have you considered that, and is that possible?
Mr. Theodore.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Council Morales, thank you for the question. And yes, we have considered many iterations of how to orient and buffer the proposed development from the existing homes to the north. So as Ms. Banfield was mentioning, the EP lands are staked, and it's something that's done in consultation with the Conservation Authority. So it's going out to the site and it's identifying the area to which the environmental feature exists, and then defining a setback buffer from that area.
So do you have any meters? Do you have any meters whatsoever? Even
So
2, even
just
3?
Building on that point, as it relates to portions of the property, extending it to 4.5 meters at this point is extending as far as possible in order to achieve that goal. We've even gone to the extent of moving the sidewalk to the south side of the driveway in order to increase that area. So 4.5 meters allows us to put a double row of trees in, which obviously creates a hardier buffer. That's in addition to a 2.1 meter high fence. So we're providing something that's more enhanced than what you typically see as a buffer space, but to try and achieve something beyond that would result in implications in terms of where the driveway access is located, where building footprints can be set, and then has a domino effect as it relates to the overall site.
Okay, I think that conversation needs to be had, and I get restrictions. You can only do so much, but I think that conversation, if possible, with living within the limits of the Conservation Authority, need to be had. In addition to that, would you consider incorporating permanent speed reduction measures, bumps, other features, having kind of like the road maybe thin out a bit to reduce speeds? Again, going on the gentleman and his wife, the comments they made, and I was writing notes while they were talking, incorporating design into speed reduction from the beginning, not putting plastic bumps later because we messed it up 25 years ago, goes a long way. And people are coming out, they're going to the road. You can only get so much speed, but at the same time, that speed is a concern. If you incorporate permanent speed bumps or even metal bollards along the residence fence, and I get that there's a cost to that, but metal bollards, the way you see it downtown, if you go to the Scotiabank Center, Rogers Center, those metal posts that kind of would prevent a vehicle from kind of crashing to the building. We even have them in downtown Barrie. If you incorporated them in very strategic locations along the fences, could provide or alleviate concerns of any vehicle, essentially going to the fence. Now, I'm not trying to, tell you how to do proper fencing, but is that something that could be considered, both speed reduction and metal bollards along sensitive points along the perimeter?
So I can say that those matter, we can take those matters back and consider them. What I will add is that the driveway is a driveway. It's not a public road. So it doesn't have the width of a public road, and it doesn't have the right-of-way boundaries of a public road. So it's a much more restricted space in terms of movement. And in addition, we've already started the process of looking at at items that help to control movement. That includes the gates as a control mechanism within the site. So we're already starting to look at the process of ways in which to control movement of traffic within the site, as well as movement of traffic through the site. So we will obviously consider any elements that will help to control speed that are within this site that are appropriate in consultation with our transportation engineer, but also recognizing that this is the development itself and the amount of vehicular movement anticipated and the angle to which the vehicles are moving and the amount of planting that is anticipated to be between the street and the fence, all of which are elements that mitigate the potential for vehicles to do a direct swerve into those locations. But again, it's something that we're happy to look at and come back as part of our resubmission.
Perfect. Let's definitely look into it. Ms. Banfield, I'm going to link these two for expediency. Drainage. Drainage is always a concern. Southeast Barrie, Ward 9, Ward 10, parts of Ward 8. It's very wet land. So drainage has always been a concern for anything, as well as the emergency responder, which we're getting a lot more, especially as we create more dense units such as towns and stacked towns. Ms. Banfield, essentially the city doesn't approve site plan, doesn't give building permits until extremely adequate, not only until we get sign off from Barrie Fire and all the appropriate departments saying that they are 100% comfortable and confident in their in and outs. And I just need you to be able to confirm that, because I know that fire safety is important for a lot of residents. And number two, appropriate drainage and appropriate, you're going to build and the grade is now going to destroy my backyard. And, these kids are already having troubles as it is. Is that something that you could clarify for residents who have to essentially bail the water out every time there's a major storm?
Ms. Banfield.
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Morales, both our fire department and our engineering department look at both of those details in great detail at various stages throughout the process, including land use applications like tonight. And then it gets far more detailed going into site plan, and all of the works are then secured through the site plan agreement and significant securities that the developer puts up to make sure they build according to the plan.
Okay, so securities meaning money at stake and they have to do things correctly. Ms. Banfield, for residents who do follow up with you about drainage, I just make sure we emphasize, I know as practices for development are changing, we're going from that little pond in the neighborhood to actually some underground drainage that's more efficient, that's able to wick water away better and drain it back into the soil. I know that was a big point with the Jones Consulting representation for the Phase 1 lands in South Ward 9. So I think that might alleviate some concerns, but again, that's an offline conversation. And I've got two more questions. Ms. Wiggins, resident, and library board member, very insightful comments that you provided about Huronia. Do you have, and I don't mean this to be a gotcha, but do we have a rough idea on when Huronia is slated in the capital plan to be essentially widened? I know that it's kind of remained the two-lane road. We've focused our efforts on urbanizing Mapleview. We focus our efforts on urbanizing or paving Lockhart, but Huronia had been in a hold pattern, and that is something that will be done. But I was just wondering, we had an idea, because obviously this development.
Okay, so Ms. Banfield or Ms. Miller, timing for Huronia Road?
I'm Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Morales. I will get back to you on that. The capital plan is very fluid right now with budget coming up, so it's best if I report back on that timing.
Okay, perfect. And then the final question here was, it was alluded, obviously right now the 3 city reports have indicated that there should be conversion from the legacy industrial to residential for various reasons. If residential was not to be put here, could you just give residents and council just a general idea of what kind of industrial use is to be expected? Because sometimes, people say, some people don't want anything. Some people, I think I heard one say maybe do industrial, and some people don't want residential, but I'm just I want everybody just to be aware of the possibilities of industrial, especially receiving and shipping, early morning trucks, that kind of nature. I just kind of want all the possibilities and options to at least be aware of, so people can make an informed opinion.
Ms. Banfield.
Certainly, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Council Morales, the full suite of industrial development would be permitted in all of these areas. So anything from manufacturing, warehousing, as I said, as you said, the transportation parts that go along with that could be some office uses, but as I said, the full range of the industrial uses would be permitted.
Okay, perfect. Very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Banfield and Mayor Lehman. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Morales. Brief questions of clarification. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman and Ms. Banfield. Just a clarification on the Loon second access. Is that a staff recommendation or is it just a technical comment right now?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Thompson, thank you for the question, and you're correct. It is a technical comment that has come out from some of our staff, some city staff, in response to the review of the application. So like all technical comments, they are being provided to the applicant, and the formal staff recommendation will come back to council in a staff report in 2021.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Any other questions of clarification, members of Planning Committee? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question to staff. So I guess Ms. Banfield, in regards to the EP lands, because obviously the one structure is partially on the EP lands in the current form. Has the city ever rezoned EP lands for residential or commercial uses in the past, or would this be the first time that we're in this situation?
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey. We get asked this question often, and the answer usually is that we use the environmental work to make sure that the zoning of the EP reflects the feature and the protection of the feature. So while there sometimes is what would seem like a rezoning of EP land, it really is just recognizing the boundaries of the feature, making sure that's zoned EP, and often that means the balance is not worthy of an EP designation, and usually we get another land use designation that's appropriate.
Just a follow-up question, if I could then. With the maps that were then provided in this presentation, how dated would they be then for this area to be designated EP in its current form?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harvey, I'm not sure what the date is on some of those maps, but ultimately, the features are defined usually at air photo level, and then do get defined on the ground with work that is done through the consultant and their environmental consultant and our conservation authority and our own staff. So I'm not sure of the date, but I definitely know that's the process to clearly articulate the features and the required buffers and all that good stuff.
Okay, great, thank you. And obviously I would hope that we've got some analysis coming forward from the Conservation Authority, because obviously the EP lands, with the line of my questions, does cause me some concern here.
Okay, any other questions? Reminder to stick to questions. Any other questions, members of Planning Committee? Okay, I only have one, Ms. Banfield. An official plan amendment is a requested change in the designation of the lands, notwithstanding these lands as identified in the presentation were some of them identified for conversion. The choice is in front of staff to make a recommendation to council as to what land use constitutes best planning. The applicant has suggested it's this medium density residential. Staff, in your staff report, will you be reporting on staff's opinion as to whether or not multi-residential constitutes the best use for these lands?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to you, Mayor Lehman, apologies, to Mayor Lehman, absolutely, that is part of the technical review that staff is going to take, and we will recommend accordingly based on our professional planning opinion.
Okay, so if staff were to determine that a different land use or designation could constitute good planning or would constitute a more appropriate choice within the bounds of the OP policy, you would recommend not approving the application, and the applicant could come back with a different application that reflected that land use. That's an option in front of staff ultimately in reporting on this application, correct?
Correct, Mayor Lehman.
Okay. And the anticipated timing for this one is early 2021?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And with that, I will declare the public meeting concluded tonight. I thank everybody who made comments. I thank the applicant for the presentation. And we will now proceed with the two presentations which are on the agenda this evening. We have two, both by Ms. Banfield, who is doing heavy duty tonight. The topics are somewhat related to the application tonight. In fact, all planning applications. First is a summary of where we have been recently, the 2019 growth report. And second, a status update on the new official plan, which will guide development going forward in our city. So Ms. Banfield, I'll call on you for the first presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I think I'm sharing my screen.
You are.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, and thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm really happy to be here tonight to talk to you a bit about 2019 and give you some of the data that's going to speak to the story of development in the city of Barrie last year. And this new approach to reporting was done under the careful eye of Jennifer Roberts, our supervisor of GIS, and Kara Babechko, one of our talented communication team members who really worked together to bring this data to life. So for the growth report this year, we really wanted an easy to understand report showing meaningful metrics, demonstrating the movement of land through land use planning, development approvals, construction, and complete communities in the city over the past year. Really looking at going from vacant land to people living in our community and capturing the data along the way. The entire report is a 4-page infographic style that summarizes the key activities of 2019. And I'm going to share some of those highlights with you tonight. Certainly, the population, that is always something that we look at, is what our population is. And you can see that we're planning for growth, certainly seeing planning activities, waiting for the full build out though of some of these proposals to get all the new residents that we are planning on welcoming. As we do see that growth, you as our council are going to be seeing the impacts of that growth, not only by people living in our community, but also the costs associated with supporting growth. Costs that really come to light during the time of budget when you're being asked to look at capital plans and capital projects and the associated operating costs of those. Throughout 2019, we've seen lots of development activity, lots of applications coming through our door and getting approved. We've seen development charges getting collected. We've seen land being dedicated through the approvals process for open space or environmental protection. New households mean new residents. And of course, the story isn't all about residential development. This report also provides information on the permits issued under the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors, ICIs, we like to call it. So while we're almost through 2020, I do hope to be back before you in early 2021 to give you an update on our 2020 activities. But for tonight, this concludes my presentation on the growth report. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions from members of Planning Committee on the growth report? And unfortunately, I can't see all of you because we're screen sharing at a moment. Let me just see if I can get everybody up there. I can see that Council, oh, thank you for that, Mr. Nolan. So I've got Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Ms. Banfield. 1,652 permits were issued in 19. I didn't see it in the presentation. What were the numbers in 2018? Just in comparable, like.
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, Councillor Thompson, but I can certainly get them to you.
Thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Aylwin.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. Great presentation, good high-level overview. Wondering if we are tracking the number of affordable units that have been approved, since in our official plan, we do have a goal of 10% affordable units for all new developments over the course of a year. So wondering if you have, if we're tracking that, and if you are, what those numbers are.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, we absolutely are tracking those, and in the fulsome 4-page report that I don't actually have in front of me, it does track that. Again, some of those, it also tells you how we get those numbers. Some of that is accounted for in second suites and other type things. But the full report does talk about the affordable housing number.
Okay, I must have missed that. I do see the second suites, but I don't see the affordable piece. But maybe I'm just missing it. So I'll take another look.
Thanks, Councillor Owen. I think, I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, Ms. Banfield. I didn't see an affordable number either. I did see the 203 second suites that were added last year. And we do know that many of those are affordable, but were there other affordable housing units in addition to the second suites? And do we know how many of the second suites were actually affordable?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, I don't believe that we actually had new affordable units, or very many of them created in 2019. There will be an additional report coming that ties into that affordable housing piece. So I'm going to ask to be able to report back on that.
Okay, Ms. Miller, I noted you popped in with your video. I suspect that means you might have something to add.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I do. I just wanted to ensure that you understand that we are able to give that full reporting. It is part of our budget reporting, and we will ensure that those numbers are included in our KPIs on the budget report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Owen, did you have any further questions?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, any other members of Planning Committee with questions? I just had one for sort of clarification, and when I was looking through the 4-page version of the report, I do like very much the user-friendly way of presenting the information, but I actually struggled to find the number of new residential units that were occupied. I did note right at the end, there's the number of new water accounts that were created, including residential, and that would strongly suggest, you know, the number of new dwelling units that were occupied. I noted that there was the numbers for building permits, but those numbers can't be the number of occupied units. That would just be building permits, including people's additions and renovations and things. So how many new residences were occupied in 2019? Do we know that?
Mayor Lehman, I don't have that number right in front of me. So certainly when we looked at, as I said, doing this user-friendly version of it and being the first year, you know, we understood that maybe we would capture everything. So we used the housing, we ended up doing the household counts and the water accounts, because we figured for sure those units were occupied, and the building department does track the full occupancy, but I can get you those numbers.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know, only because obviously last year there was a major variance between the number of permits issued and the number of occupancies, I guess in this case defined as new water accounts. And I would assume that little asterisk that sits underneath it in the report itself that says secondary suites don't have a separate water billing account, or not always, almost never. So we would then, I guess, add those other 200 second suites. But if we could get a sense of that, or it might be something for the next report. Then the only other question I had about the nature of growth was the percentage of growth that was intensification versus non. Apologies if that was there and I missed it. Do we have a sense in 2019 of how much development was inside the built boundary and how much was greenfield?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, or to you, Mayor Lehman, for the most part, we are really trying to look at growth management across the city, and we can absolutely take that feedback about differentiating. For the most part, I would say that it was infill development that we saw the new units in. As you know, the secondary plans areas are busy, but we don't have tons of residents living in there just yet. So a lot of the development we see is actually in the built boundary.
Okay, thanks for that. The other thought that I had in reviewing the report is that it would be really useful to track this against the targets that are in our growth plan, both in the provincial growth plan and our own planning documents. I think we have heard from staff for some time now that development in the secondary plan areas has been lagging the forecasts by a considerable amount, not due to any lack of demand or interest, but it just seems that the development activity is not at the pace that was forecast by the secondary plan documents at the time. And that's not necessarily a problem, because of course we're able to gear our own infrastructure plans and the time that we construct city facilities and roads and pipes and things to the actual need. But it would be, I think, helpful, especially when we're looking at those population forecasts, but also especially the employment forecasts. It's been a long-standing goal of council, going right back to the 2010 principles for development of the secondary plan, that the growth in jobs match the growth in population, or at least the growth in the labor market. So as a very broad principle, making sure that Barrie doesn't become more of a bedroom community by attempting to gear employment development to the pace of residential development, or vice versa, was a goal that we'd established early on. And now that we're finally, many years later, seeing the development of the secondary plans, that would be great information to be able to report to the community. But I think this is, just by way of comment on the presentation, I think this is a big leap forward in terms of reporting on the pace and the nature of development in our city, and starting to have a real dashboard that gives us a year-by-year insight. Having been on council now for 14 years, we would often go years between looking at this kind of information, and it certainly wouldn't be presented in this way. So I appreciate the format and the content. Any other questions or comments from members of council on the presentations, on this presentation? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask you to give us the second one about the official plan project.
Okay. And I think I'm sharing this one now.
You are, we can see it.
Okay, super. So thank you again. I'm happy to be here tonight, still talking to you this time about our official plan project. So I have a lot of ground to cover this evening about what we've done and the important milestone that we are reaching shortly on the new official plan, which is the first release of the draft documents that's planned for next week. The presentation this evening also was augmented by the memo that was on the agenda as well. And so the project began in 2018, and we committed to doing several things, creating transformative documents to guide the city's transformation. committed to unparalleled community engagement, but also with our internal and external partners. We really wanted to establish a clear vision and coordinate that vision with our other city departments and our partner agencies, and looked really at developing a growth management strategy for future growth, as well as providing some details and guidance on urban design matters. So the document before you that's going to be released is built on a very solid foundation. We came to you about a year or so ago to articulate the growth management vision and to explore the employment land conversions in the built boundary. And the technical work supported that vision and the assessment of the amount of land that we needed for our community to grow. And that's what the official plan is based upon, this draft official plan is based upon. There is a need for more land to be added to the settlement boundary to support the 2041 targets of people and jobs. This land is going to be in both the Salem and Hewitt secondary plan areas for both employment and community area lands. And the proposed changes to the settlement boundary are going to be shown on the draft official plan documents when they're issued for public comment next week. We wanted to give clear direction. We wanted these documents to give clear direction on what's important to our city and how to achieve that vision. And some of those details include those intensification targets, transition between our existing communities and future development proposals, that density of people and jobs and the efficient use of our land and infrastructure and resources. And again, a focus on urban design, which is becoming increasingly important in all we do. So the matters that, what mattered to Barrie became clear very quickly as we engaged with our community, and the community consultation quickly identified about 7 major themes that captured our community's priorities. Those themes translated right into this policy structure and the draft official plan. And the policy is intended to provide direction to bring the vision into a reality. And the center of it all is Barrie being an urban and complete city, with the surrounding themes contributing to the entire city, and each element having its own goals and objectives to be realized. And our draft documents are ready for release. I'm very excited to say that as of next week, we will have a draft official plan available for review, some draft urban design guidelines, and some demonstration plans that are intended to articulate the policies and the urban design guidelines. So we have a busy, well, we're always fortunate to be very busy in our department, but we do have a busy few months ahead, you know, starting later this week with some external stakeholder engagement, the release of the draft documents next week. That starts a 90-day consultation period. You know, throughout that time, I'm happy to meet with any of you to discuss the draft versions of these documents in greater detail. We're going to be having the statutory requirements of open houses and public meeting, and that's where you're going to be able to hear more from our community. The adoption of the new official plan, you'll be asked to make those decisions, and then that material is going to be sent off to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. The new zoning bylaw work is actually going to springboard off the excitement of the new official plan, and it's going to be worked on somewhat concurrently, but brought to you as well for consideration closely following the adoption of our new official plan. And we are ready to engage. We have worked on a series of videos that show Barrie's diverse residents and how passionate they are about our city. So I'm going to show you this video that we've done. So please note it was done before COVID, so you're not going to see mask wearing or physical distancing. And the video is going to conclude my presentation, but of course I will be available afterwards for questions. So I thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
the interesting things about where Barrie is located is that it is definitely proximal to all these other cities like Newmarket, Vaughan, Richmond Hill. But as the pressure for growth expands from the GTA outwards, Barrie has a unique opportunity to kind of like look at its own identity and all the strengths that it has.
I think one of the things that amazes people from Toronto when they come, if they actually get off the highway and get into the city and then see the waterfront. I mean, the waterfront really is where we shine. And the fact that we have this interesting city wrapped around a beautiful waterfront that is still clean enough to swim in, still beautiful enough for people just to walk around and really enjoy it. And we really notice it during festivals and things like that, where you know, our city is a destination. Other people are vacationing here.
Barrie is becoming quite cosmopolitan, I think. They're adding hotels and all kinds of things that are attracting people. But for seniors, I think they just need affordable housing and access to the things they need.
How can we make better decisions that influence planning to give a more livable city right out of the gate? So we can mix seniors housing with young families, with young professionals, and then support those uses with services like grocery stores and a burrito shop.
What would you like to see?
I like to see in Toronto they have sharing bikes where you pay for a bike and then you can ride it. I want more kids to be like walking around outside.
I would like to see the city come back to some friendly neighborhood connections. Like, can you have a specific day or week that's neighborhood week on your street where you are to go to every house on the neighborhood and introduce yourself? Just thinking about what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I'd like to see a green city with covered in trees, a complete city where our kids can grow up here, go to school here, then live here and work here.
What kind of a city do we want? Do we want to sprawl like these other places in the south and just have, you know, indefinite residential suburbs? Or can we really have a considered plan to manage growth and density in a way that gives us a livable downtown core that's surrounded by really healthy, vibrant residential areas with close connection to public amenities like parks and community centers?
And a little forethought can make a big difference.
All right, thank you very much for the video, obviously for the residents and those involved on our end in putting that together. Members of Planning Committee, questions for Ms. Banfield? Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Great video, lots of familiar faces, and I'm really interested to see how the official plan brings more burrito shops to the city. I think that's kind of the key issue here. But I do have a question related to my question on the previous presentation. So I over and over again ask the same question of developers who come here for public meetings, the proposed development. What are you doing to meet the goal of 10% affordable units in all new developments? I know we haven't released the draft official plan yet, but are we looking at strengthening that goal to a requirement so that we finally have a way to meet our affordable housing targets? It sounds like we might not have built any units last year, which we've got to change. So wondering if you can hint if that's coming.
Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, I think that's one of those things that I talked to you about earlier, where, you know, when the draft documents come out, you'll have the opportunity to look at that. And then we can talk specifically about affordable housing and how you feel about those draft policies in there.
All right, thanks. You'll be hearing from me for sure.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Councillor Riepma.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and this is also for Michelle. Our friends at the province just a little while ago changed things a little bit, and now are looking at us doing our planning to 2051 and giving us a number of about 300,000. How does that, that change affect what we're doing here in this plan at this point?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Rietma. So a lot of our work was done with the 2041 numbers. So at this point, staff are going to continue to work with those 2041 numbers. The 2051 numbers are hot off the press. But I can say to you that even with the settlement boundary expansion to the 2041 numbers, there is still land within the municipal boundary that would be able to look at accommodating those 2051 numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Morales.
Ms. Banfield, thank you, Mayor Lehman. Development in the urban node, especially the downtown core, and I'm talking apartments and condos, very tall, very dense things. They're already limited by environmental, they're limited by financing, they're projects that take a long time. What can we do as part of this plan as a municipality to cut as many barriers as possible to attract the kind of developers, and I don't mean the Barrie developers, I mean, and I see Councillor McCann nodding, I mean the Silverbergs of the world, the ones that can finance 80, 200, $300 million projects that have incredible impacts on the local economy, jobs, construction, and afterwards, and also help us not only meet these targets, as Councillor Rietma was saying, but gets the density that might be a bit taboo out of the suburb wards. The Ward 9 meeting today, it happens in Ward 8, it happens in Ward 7, and people say, let's put it somewhere else. And we've got a downtown core, and if we do it properly, that's where it should be going. So is there anything that this plan can do to not bypass the process, but facilitate the process and send a message to investors out of town who are looking at those $250 million projects or attempts and saying, you know what, Barrie is doing things that we're not getting in GTA municipalities, and we're going to go invest in Barrie? Because I think we're not only going to have a more healthy, vibrant downtown, especially the West End, but we can also address some of these intensification concerns that all of us as councillors are seeing in our own suburbs.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, certainly the vision, the official plan is the vision, and it's directing growth to those areas that we want to see growth in. So you referenced the downtown and the urban growth center. So the idea is for a document to provide as much clarity as possible while still, being flexible to respond to development and developers when they come into the municipality. So it's a combination of that. And then the zoning bylaw also that will follow shortly is going to try to implement that vision. So as I said, this lays the groundwork to direct development in the form and the look in the places that we want to. And I think that's going to go a long way for the people that you're talking about, that clarity, that certainty, that identifying those areas that we want to see the development.
Sorry, Councillor Morales, you're still muted.
I was just saying thank you. As I was saying, that policy goes a long way, and I think the days of leaving a parcel and waiting decades for somebody to knock on the door are gone. And we're going to need some good ambassadors to attract and help everybody, both in the suburbs and our downtown core. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morales. Councillor Kungle.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Ms. Banfield. I'm looking at the slide that was shared around the path ahead, and that gave a bulleted list of the different engagement phases, roughly. Noting that the 90-day consultation is a minimum, but that we're looking at releasing it on September 24th and concluding in around January. And then I think the first public open house is roughly scheduled for spring. I didn't know if you could elaborate at all for any member of public watching around that 90-day consultation. What activities might take place there around forums that the public should be looking for within that 90-day window? Is it just through the City of Barrie website or other opportunities? just thinking about a town hall coming up, we have this Thursday for a couple of wards, and if we can help to front load or prime individuals for what to look for next week. But also my assumption between that January and spring 2021 timeline could be up to a quarter or at least a couple of months. So I didn't know if for the public that's a hard closure of a public consultation after the 90 days, or is there an opportunity to see then a draft of what's coming out or what's been refined and give feedback to that again?
Absolutely. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle, thanks for the question. And the community engagement part is super important. So 90 days, as I said, this is the first draft. There are going to be lots of activities. Buildingberry.ca is our online engagement platform, and I always encourage people to register on buildingberry.ca, and you can get updates that way. But certainly the normal social media feeds at this point, we are going to be really rocking the virtual engagement for the foreseeable future. So the Twitter, the Twib, the Facebook, all those kind of good things for sure. And then, that gap you talked about from the 90 days to there's going to be an open house. So we basically, after those 90 days, we'll be beavering away, going through the comments. Then there'll be an open house that will kind of do another draft, and we'll show kind of how we responded to those comments. Then there'll be a public meeting, and there'll be more opportunities to speak at the public meeting. Lots and lots of opportunities between now and when it finally goes back to council for adoption. And of course, staff, a host of staff are always available to answer questions or speak to members of the public on this.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Councillor Kungle. Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Ms. Banfield. Councillor Morales kind of captured part of my question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I think it's of interest to residents of Ward 8. The Urban Growth Center is obviously a key to our plan, and that is often considered, people recognize the Ward 2 area downtown, but also includes sections of Ward 8 and Allendale. I just wanted to maybe I've asked the question, maybe I made a statement, I apologize. But how key and how important is the focus on the Urban Growth Center to our plan?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris. Well, the Urban Growth Center is, we've inherited it. It's the part of the growth plan. So, it is important. It is the area that, is intended to see significant growth. And it is the area that we're seeing these significant proposals in. But in addition to the Urban Growth Center, there are areas around our 2 GO stations that are also going to be important to getting some of that intensification, and the urban structure of the new official plan is going to, as I said, pick those areas. So the Urban Growth Center is absolutely important. It's one of the tools in our toolbox for getting some intensification, but there are other provisions in the plan for the same type of considerations.
Yeah, thank you. And similar to Councillor Morales' comment around, how do you kind of springboard or encourage growth? I mean, it's interesting how little development's happened around our transit hubs, in particular the Allendale Waterfront GO station, and hoping that there's mechanisms to really improve that area's attraction to development.
Thanks for the comment, Councillor Harris. And the questions, any others with questions for Ms. Banfield? I guess I have 2 at this point. With the official plan, we're setting direction, but we're also providing a path for development and providing guidance, policy guidance as to where we want what kind of development to occur in the city. And when you talk about this, there's a quote in the movie Lincoln that I've always loved about this, which is, he's talking about a compass. And if you have a compass, you know what direction north is. But a compass isn't in terms of finding the right path to get to true north. It won't tell you about the swamps or the chasms or the dangers along the way. So it's good to have a direction. It's good to be clear about what your goal is and what your direction is. But if you're not effective, if you're also not effective in creating policy that will get you there, then it doesn't really matter what your goal is. So the reason I raise that is, I'm starting to feel old saying this twice in one meeting, but in 14 years on council and now my third official plan, some of the goals of our policy have been realized. We've fundamentally changed the way Barrie grows. We used to be almost completely suburban in our development. Almost, in some years, 90+% of development was sprawl. Since 2010, it's been almost the reverse. Now, some of that was a land shortage, and with the secondary plans, it'll balance out a little better. But the reason I raise it is, we've also had goals for downtown intensification or revitalization, streets like Bradford Street. And a trip down Bradford Street will tell you that the policies, while encouraging that, have not translated to redevelopment. I mean, the development simply hasn't happened. So how, in crafting this official plan, are staff consulting with the people who make these investments and make developments to ensure that our policies are going to be effective this time in achieving the goals of the plan, in reaching True North? And I would similarly, I could ask that question about affordable housing. I think Councillor Elwin already has. I'm asking in this case more about our intensification goals, where we have not yet seen the intensification of some of the areas of our city, the redevelopment, for example, of Bradford Street or the west end of downtown. So what are we doing differently this time to ensure that those policies are effective?
To you, Mayor Lehman, I think it goes back to that unparalleled community engagement. So not only are we engaging with our community, but we have engaged with our industry partners early and often, and I'm going to be meeting with a bunch of them tomorrow and Thursday as well to talk about what wasn't working in the original official plan, or like the official plan that we have, and I'm really trying to capture some of those feedback early in the process. And as I said, the development community is very important to us in terms of recognizing kind of what they need, but again, at the same token, having that work with the community's vision as well. So I think it's a complex equation of policies and land and financial situations. Again, that coordination that I talked about with the our internal and external stakeholders, trying to tie the official plan to financially responsible planning decisions, tying it to available and planned infrastructure, so that you're not having one developer kind of go down a road and then have to kind of do lots and lots of infrastructure improvements. So it's kind of all of those where we really are trying to integrate all of those moving pieces the best that we can into the policy document, have those discussions now, and hopefully put that all towards a great kind of vision for the community that will be easily implemented and will be implemented in a way that is good for our entire community.
Okay. Ms. Miller, you look like this might be another one you want to add on to.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, for the opportunity. I can't take the planner out of the general manager sometimes. So I would like to just add that I think that there's another really important part of this process that Ms. Banfield and the entire team is working on, and we have been committed to delivering a compendium, urban design guidelines, and demonstration plans, which are really going to show how that implementation of the vision and the policy are going to take place. Hot on the heels of the official plan will be the updated zoning bylaw, because the zoning bylaw is the detailed implementation tool, and it's really been a challenge in the city of Barrie that the zoning bylaw has been so out of step with the official plan policies, and therefore we've not been able to in a timely and efficient way and bring some of that vision to reality, because there's so many additional hurdles to overcome. So really the goal from day one has been to try and update the entire policy suite when it comes to development opportunities. And it's not just residential, it's the whole suite, everything from land for employment, for commercial, for other types of community uses that are going to be important to the community.
Okay, my follow-up question to that would be, I think we, a good official plan is a collective expression of our community's vision for itself. But again, it needs to be effective in guiding to the achievement of that vision for it to be an effective policy document. And I think we heard from several members of council tonight. I really appreciated the comments from councillors Morales and Harris and Councillor Aylwin with regards to the specific nature of development applications in their area and what does and doesn't fit with perhaps their overall vision with how the city should be developing and structured. We have time and again, as we've gone through dozens of planning applications, heard concerns, obviously, from residents that a particularly intensification developments in areas that aren't really meant for intensification, that doesn't fit at all with their vision for their community. Fair enough. At the same time, we know it is our goal to intensify particularly nodes and corridors and to stop sprawling and grow more responsibly. When you're writing the official plan, there's been a clear theme, I think, in the last many years of we have received intensification applications all over the city. And the planners who present those applications always refer to the enabling language in the existing official plan that says intensification is good everywhere. And here are generally the criteria we look for. But an examination of the recommendations that have come from staff and council's actions on them would suggest that we've approved many of those applications, even in areas that really weren't intended for them, because in part they had the backing of those general policies. This is an opportunity with the new official plan to focus intensification. And my first question was leading to the second one, because we have some areas where we want redevelopment and intensification, and it just hasn't happened. It hasn't materialized. In some cases, we've had applications. Bradford Street's got applications up and down it that have been approved for high-rise buildings. None have been built. So I think the question that I have at this point is, we're moving into this really wonderful moment in the development of the official plan where there was a great background study done. We know the goal is to take what actually has been happening to some extent very well, which is slowing down the sprawl and starting to redevelop some of our key nodes and corridors. But we're still missing some areas where that hasn't happened yet. And with a official plan that can focus intensification, for example, by limiting it in stable residential areas, as the Toronto official plan does, and by virtue of that, also making it more permissive or broader for the areas that we really do want to see it. We can use effective policy to do what I think some of the members of council tonight are talking about doing, attracting and supporting the development where we want it, and maybe stopping some of these applications or providing more of an expression of concern around applications for intensification in areas where it's just not suitable. And I think that would maybe reflect what I hear from residents of Barrie and the goals for their OP. So, we do make comments on presentations, and that was really more of a comment. But I guess the question I have is, as you move forward here into developing those detailed plans, is there a thought to greater protections for stable, low-density residential neighborhoods, and also at the same time focusing intensification on those nodes, corridors, mixed-use areas where we have already done so much to try and support it, but want to go even further?
Mayor Lehman, I'm just going to answer with a yes. I know it's a lot. I know there's a lot of back and forth, but absolutely, this is the point in time we're in. And certainly what you've expressed is what we've heard from the community, and very much that is what we have tried to make the draft document and the urban design guidelines, those pieces working together to address that, some of those things.
Okay. Thanks for that. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through your worship, to Ms. Banfield. And so I'm going to plead some ignorance here, but when I think a bit about the setting good policy for development and intensification, and I come back to wondering about what is that relationship that I may not appreciate, or is there a formal relationship between how policy is set and then what translates then to committee of adjustment? So in the past couple of committee of adjustment development meetings, I'm hearing from developers this annual increase in cost of construction and materials, and some of the justification for increased density being recovery of cost. And then depending on how long the time frame goes between approval process and construction, are we going to see a driver that touches committee of adjustment that may not align to the vision set out in policy or intensification or density that we're setting within the official plan and zoning? Does that make sense? It's a relationship I'm seeing, and I'm not sure how it works.
For sure, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle. So the Committee of Adjustment is tied more to, I would say, the zoning bylaw, to be honest, in terms of what the applications the Committee of Adjustment sees. That being said, anything that the Committee of Adjustment considers has to conform to the official plan. So that's where this official plan piece is important. And then just as important as the zoning bylaw that's coming underneath it. But as I said, the Committee of Adjustment really is tied a little bit more to the zoning bylaw piece of that.
A follow-up question, if I may. So as then we're setting the new official plan and zoning bylaws, is that a factor that then gets appreciated around economic or cost drivers, where we would see that being, you know, the cost of construction or the change in the cost of construction actually becoming a driver to how we set our guidelines?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle, there are certainly, that is the feedback that we often get from the development industry, the stakeholders from the development industry. Costs are considered when we're looking at the official plan, and I kind of alluded to that when I was saying that you know, the plan is being developed with input from other departments in the city to talk about that those financial ties and the and as well the infrastructure. So so it is a bit twofold, and as I said, it goes hand in hand, but it's not necessarily a complete direct relationship, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. And final follow-up, and it may not, let me know if it's not felt to be appropriate, but I guess for me, it feels like when we talk about affordable housing, how important it will be to incentivize this if it's more challenging or felt to be more challenging now and in the near future around the cost of various built forms, and whether or not we're actually going to see developers paying more of a penalty, hypothetically, versus actually coming to the table with affordable housing solutions and options, if it's just not an affordable structure in their mind from a cost recovery. So I'm not sure if you have an opinion at this time, or based on what we've seen to date, around an interest or engagement with developers coming to the table with viable affordable housing options, or if you think that will continue to be a potential challenge if there's a cost relationship to being able to do that and it's not being seen as viable.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Kungle, affordable housing, I say is a complicated concept for us to consider. There are many aspects that contribute to that, and some of those are things like second suites and accessory suites. And we have a newly approved community improvement plan. And there is, you know, that housing continuum from CMHC that basically goes from homelessness all the way to, you know, full market ownership. So there's a few things, you know, already that, and including additional rental spaces, you know, so there's a suite of things available from affordable housing that, you know, that all work together, you know, and that's not even including what our affordable housing or social housing partners do on their own and working with the county. So, so there are a lot of different pieces to that, and they all do work together. Some are in the OP, and then some are accessory and outside of the official plan.
Thank you. That's everything for me.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. Deputy Mayor Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you for the presentation, Ms. Banfield. Your report indicated that it'll probably be more than a year before we even see it as a council in terms of approvals, and then it'll have to go off to the province for approval after that. And there's this parallel zoning bylaw process going on at the same time. We're likely to see a lot of development approvals coming forward in the next year before it's approved. So what happens in the transition? Because is both staff going to be trying to make their decisions based on the new official plan, although they can't actually base them on it, but knowing it's coming down, and as a council, do we take it into consideration that the rules might be changing in a year's time? How does the transition period work?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Deputy Mayor Ward. So the official plan that is in place is the official plan that current applications would be amending or being required to comply with. Definitely in the interim, once draft versions are out, that is going to, I think, influence kind of what, certainly from a staff perspective, what we're looking at, and it'll provide information, some of that clarity to the public. But the new official plan, as I said, will not apply, and applications in the interim are going to be subject to the existing official plan.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, and thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Are there any other questions for Ms. Banfield or comments on the presentation? Okay, thank you very much. Good discussion from Planning Committee tonight. Thanks for the update, and we'll all look forward to the documents dropping in about a week's time.
Thank you.
Members of Planning Committee, with an hour to go, we'll move into our staff reports. There is only one staff report that was held, and that is with regards to 79 Gowan Street. It was held by Councillor Ritma. Councillor Ritma.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd put this on the floor for discussion as printed, and I have an amendment.
Okay, go ahead.
My amendment is very simple. It's 2A, or sorry, rather 2B. The current maximum front yard setback of 19.5 meters, and my amendment is to change the 19.5 to 11. And I can.
Sorry, can we just get that again, Councillor Ritma?
All right. If you look at the report before us, item 2B.
Yep.
There's a number in there, 19.5 meters, which is the maximum front yard setback. And my amendment is to change the 19.5 to 11.
19.5 to 11, okay. Okay, would you care to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you. All over the city, we are working very hard, and most of our applications we approve, moving buildings closer to the street. And we do that in order to create an edge to the streets, and to create a streetscape, and to improve urban design. And in this situation, you'll see that the minimum front yard is 1 meter, and that is in 2A. And then the maximum is proposed to be 19.5 meters, which is, a very large range. And it tends to, I think in this case, we'll put the building potentially right at the back of the property, and we'll end up with a parking lot in the front of the building, which is exactly the opposite of what we want to see throughout the city in most places. Now, we are kind of bedeviled in this case, because at the moment there is a 30-meter setback from the GO line right of way. And Gowan Street in this location is 20 meters wide. So the building to meet the GO station requirements could be at 10 meters. And that's why, given a bit of flexibility, I've suggested 11. And that will pull this building closer to the road and will meet with the requirements of GO. Now, there is an indication in item C that perhaps the applicant will be able to convince GO to go to 20 meters instead. And that would be fine with me. That'll be up to GO, I suppose. And then he could go all the way down to 1 meter. So this, in order to try to make this bylaw work in the sense of what we've always been trying to do everywhere, I'm suggesting that we make the maximum setback 11 meters so that we can accommodate the 30 meter setback that GO may or may not insist upon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Riepma. I have Councillor Thompson and Councillor Harris. I know you've been working on this with your residents. I'll come to you next. So Councillor Rob Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to the mover. I know that in the staff report, it speaks on basically the building being at the very front or at the back. And I think they've touched on both, which with a 10-foot buffer, if the building is at the back before, so it actually isn't a parking lot right at the front of the road. It's got a very nice landscaped buffer. And to be honest, I think at this point, we're kind of handcuffed by the GO. And I think staff took that into consideration. But at this point, I think we need to get out of the way, and let this building go. There's been absolutely no development on Gowan Street. And I went there, I met with Councillor Jim Harris, and I walked with residents, and the GO station's right across the street. And we haven't had any development. And just going back to the presentations with the urban growth, and I just think that, like Mayor Lehman said about the compass, yeah, we know what way's north, but we seem to spin the compass around and block every possible way. So like I said, I think the staff report touched everything, and I will not support the amendment. And I just don't think GO is going to give in. And we don't know what it'll, if the buffer might be a very nice streetscape. So I won't be supporting it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Jim Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. Maybe first of all, a question through you to Ms. Banfield. Obviously, the issue with the 30-meter setback from Metrolinx has been a central issue with this development, and with many people being involved. And we've met on site with developer, ANA representatives, Ms. Kanjan. Thank you to Miles Wilson for setting up meetings on that regard. So lots of consideration, and actually I appreciate Councillor Thompson for coming as well to get an outside view as well of this development and the proposal and the restrictions that are really faced with it. So I wonder if you could tell me, Ms. Banfield, what provisions are proposed in the recommendation about the building and related to the setback on Gowan Street?
Ms. Banfield.
Certainly, Mayor Lehman, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris. So ultimately, the staff report is worded to provide that flexibility to allow the property owner to still work with Metrolinx to see if there's the ability to reduce that setback. We provided a range in the front yard setback to allow for that. If they're not successful doing that, then we have provided a maximum setback, so we know that the building's not going to be any further back than it is, and we've increased the landscape strip around the parking if it stays the way it is. And I would draw your attention to the pages near the end of the staff report, pages like 32 and 33. That shows some of the that landscape strip, the planting proposed, if that's actually the ultimate streetscape. So as I said, we've allowed for the flexibility for them to continue to work with Metrolinx, and then if not, we've asked for the extra protection, the extra landscape strip and space for increased plantings for those 7 or so parking spaces that would be in the front yard.
Thank you. And I know there's very few absolutes in life. I know Councilor Riepma mentioned that always and every time we do this certain thing with the building placement. Is the urban planning design principles, is it always and forever that the building be at the roadside? Is that required in every in all cases? And that was a question, Ms. Banfield, through you, Mayor Lehman.
Yeah, Ms. Banfield.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris. Well, I mean, every planning policy and provision has to be worked through the actual site context. So no, there's not absolutes for sure. Certainly, council will see us coming to them, recommending a reduced front yard setback often for buildings, but at the same token, in this instance, there are different ways to beautify the street frontage or have a great front yard facade. And as I said, in this instance, if it's not the building closer, then we've added in that extra provision so that it would be landscaping and you can see the walkway, the pedestrian walk and that sort of thing. So it's as long as it's addressed in some way, and that can be done, as I said, through built form or through landscaping or fencing or vegetation.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Actually, that was interesting. I remember at the neighborhood meeting at South Shore, that was my first kind of thought was, hey, maybe this could be a really neat feature to create landscape along Gowan, given the restrictions with the 30-meter setback and the interest in getting something done and to revitalize this area. Recognizing that across the road is all parking. We have parking across the street from the GO station. So creating a landscape buffer might be more interesting than a building streetscape. But also wondering as well, just for some context for continuity, am I correct that the Gowan Street from Bayview to William is all, there's none of it is designated or commercial? It's all residential of one nature?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris, Jim Harris, I do believe it's residential, yes.
All right, and through you, Mayor Lehman, to Ms. Banfield again, is all of the Gowan Street property from William to Essa commercial?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris, I'd have to look that up for you. I don't have that right at my fingertips, the zoning map for that area, but I'm happy to do that or happy to report back.
Thank you. I believe it is. And my point would be, and also just, am I correct, Ms. Banfield, that the Metrolink setback is different for commercial than residential?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris, there are different setbacks, absolutely, through Metrolinks across their corridor.
Right, thank you. So my point, I guess, would be that really we could create continuity from William to Maple and, pardon me, William to Bayview, and then Bayview, William, pardon me, to Essa, given that they're both, those areas are designated differently. And just maybe a final question through you, Mayor Lehman, to Ms. Banfield. Having been on site with the developer and others, this building is an either or. It's either in the back with parking in the front or in the front with parking in the back. Moving this line a little bit doesn't put the building in the middle. It can't be done that way. So is that really what Councilor Riepma is presenting, is really not going to change the building at all? Is that correct?
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris, the shifting the building or having the parking in the rear also was something that was raised and addressed in the staff report as having its own intricacies. So, as I said, it's that the site is presented with the recommendation as it is to kind of allow for that flexibility to the best extent possible.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate the interest in trying to make some adjustments and from Councilor Riepma, but given the amount of time spent on this and speaking with all those involved, a middle spot is just not available in this development. And certainly with the interest in the Urban Growth Center and trying to help see some revitalization of the Allendale area, which many residents are very excited about. You know, the landscape buffer seems like if we don't get the setback and the building goes to the front, the relief from Metrolinx, then the landscape buffer seems like a real reasonable compromise to put the building in the back and the parking in the front. So I just, with those factors and how much work's got into this on all parties, the investigation with our MPP and their efforts on our behalf, I just can't support the amendment on this matter. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris.
Mr. Mayor, just given Councillor Harris's comments, I'm still convinced of my position, but I'm going to withdraw my amendment.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Councillor Riepma. We have the matter on the floor as printed originally. Any further comments? Deputy Mayor Ward.
This question is completely different, but this staff report refers to this as a 4-story walk-up. And the Sean Mason proposal that was near the corner of Veterans and Essa Road we passed earlier referred to a 5-story walk-up. I actually looked at the zoning bylaw trying to find a definition of what walk-up meant. And I'm curious, what is a walk-up apartment? I mean, 5-story seems like a lot to be talking about a walk-up apartment. So I'm kind of curious. And there are, you know, parking provisions for walk-up apartments which don't apply to others. So I'm kind of curious what walk-up means.
Ms. Banfield.
The walk-up apartment is thought about less of where a traditional apartment often has the internal corridors that you would think about, and the walk-up has external accesses to the units.
Do they have elevators? I assume if it's a 5-story apartment building, it has elevators.
They would have elevators through you, Mayor Lehman, to Deputy Mayor Ward. They'd have elevators in accordance with the requirements of the building code.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Any further comments? I just want to make one. I guess I remember the public meeting on this one not too long ago, and I'm quite supportive of Councillor Harris's sort of position. I mean, the reality is it's either at the front or it's at the back. My own opinion on this, and in saying that I will support the motion that's on the floor, I'm disappointed in two things. One is I think it is actually going to look really weird. We're going to have one building that sits back in the middle of the block. Everything else is up at the front. The reality is, yes, the standards may have changed. Metrolinx may want this, but it's going to result in a workaround at best. Now, that workaround doesn't look too bad. I think it's well landscaped, and I think it's great. It's great that we are seeing, you know, a form of redevelopment on Gowan Street that's pretty consistent with the neighborhood. There's certainly other 3-4-story buildings with this kind of number of units in the area, rather than really trying to push the density. This fits a little more closely with the area. So that's good to see. And I think it is good to see something happening on Gowan Street. But if I might make comment, because I think the setback issue is still open. I remember at the time of the public meeting, you know, it would not have been hard to reshape this building a little bit to allow for the driveway to come around back, for the parking to be around back, and for it to be quite attractive and consistent with the other residential uses if Metrolinx comes off of the setback. So to the extent that that's still a live issue, I guess my comment to staff is let's push them one more time. You know, not all of the street's going to redevelop. And we're going to have a few more redevelopments. The same setback provision is going to come in, and we're going to end up with a street that's half back from the street, half at the front, not very consistent. And it's not just how it looks, it's how it functions. It's you know, front door parking lots and those sorts of things, which really isn't the best. So to the extent we can still push, get it at the front and then switch, you know, the place of the building and the parking, I think would be better. But if not, I think it is a net positive for the neighborhood. So I'll certainly support the approval recommendation that staff are giving. And with that, I'll call the question. Could everyone please indicate with your signs, if you've got them, those in favor of the motion on the floor? And opposed, please indicate. 1. Okay, that carries by those voting. I don't know. Yeah, okay. That carries by those voting. That completes our staff reports for this evening. It brings us to inquiries. Deputy Mayor Ward, any inquiries of staff tonight? Any inquiries from members of Planning Committee to staff? Okay, seeing none, that concludes our agenda. It was a thorough agenda, some good discussion around policy and an application. Planning Committee is adjourned at 10:15. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on Monday night for council.